Hello guys, welcome to another exciting and interesting series tutorial where we are going to be building a full stack web application using Django Graphql Reactjs and Apollo Client. In this tutorial we are going to learn how to build a full-fledged GraphQL API and also how to consume these API resources using our favorite front-end library or framework, which is React and the Apollo Client. Now, before we dive into the project and we'll start coding any stuff, first of all, let's understand what the GraphQL is and why we should consider using GraphQL in some of our projects. What's GraphQL? GraphQL is a new API standard that provides more efficient alternative to REST API. It was developed and open source by Facebook. It's a query language for APIs. GraphQL is not specifically for Python programming alone. It can be used with any other backend framework or programming language, whether you're using Node.js or you're using Java, using whichever backend language that you use, you can actually use it with GraphQL API. And also the front-end library is not just React alone, it can be used with Angular or Vue or which. Alright, so what are the challenges that GraphQL helps us to solve that REST API encounters? So let's see some of those challenges that we can actually solve or that makes GraphQL more efficient than a REST API. In a REST environment, when working with a REST API, we tend to expose several endpoints for different requests, whether get, posts or puts or delete requests. And as our application becomes bigger, the number of endpoints increases, which sometimes become very difficult for us to manage. And depending on the structure of the REST API, receiving data takes more than one request. But in a GraphQL environment, the reverse is the case. We only use a single endpoint, while our server responds to query that the client wants with the exact data that is specified by the client. So a GraphQL fetches data, or we fetches data in a GraphQL environment using queries, while we change or modify our data using mutation. We'll talk more about this later on in the course. So how does this work? We expose a single endpoint while we communicate or we fetch any specific data that we want using queries. Another benefit of GraphQL API is it enables declarative data fetching, where you have to specify only the data that you need from the server. This helps us eliminate overfetching and underfetching. Now, what do I mean by overfetching and underfetching? Now, let's take an example again from the REST API. Let's say we have a simple REST API. I want to get a particular post from our REST API. Let's say a post with the ID of 5. The endpoint will look similar to something like, and in this case, it will return the response of this particular post with all the data. Alright, let's say for example in our application we only want just the title of the post and the date that the post were created. These are the data that we want to display in our application. But for us to actually get this data in the REST environment, we have to get the single post with that specific ID, and this return for us all the data regarding that post. But what we want is just the title and the date. Having that, the other information that is being returned by the server, which maybe the ID or the content or the post, are just waste. So in this case, this is what we refer to as overfetching. GraphQL helps us to eliminate, because in the GraphQL environment we only specify the exact data that we want in our query. So what we did, example of what we did in a REST API, this is the query in a GraphQL environment. In the GraphQL environment, we only make a single query to the post. We are getting a post with the ID, and what we want is just the title and the date. So this returns for us the exact data that we specified in our query. So our response will look similar to something like this. Data give us the post with the title that we specify and the dates that we specify. Alright, so if we want any other information regarding this post, while we want the image of the post or the description, we can also specify in our query, and return to us the exact data that is specified in our query. So this is one of the benefits of GraphQL API. So another way GraphQL API can also help us emulate underfetching. Underfetching, let's take for example, we have a news application where we have a user profiles page, and maybe we want to display the username of the user and provide the titles of the articles written by this user and provide the followers of this user. In a REST environment, that kind of example will have to make several requests to our API to actually get that working. Probably we have to first of all get the specific user, like and maybe to get the articles written by this specific author, we have to make another request to my website /API/author/ the ID of the author with the articles, and this will return the list of all the articles written by the specific author, not just the title alone, the content and every other information like this. So in this case, we are making several or multiple requests just to get information for just a profile page. But in a GraphQL environment, the reverse is the case. We can actually get all the information. The information about the author, his articles, or probably his followers, and even the articles comment in just one single query. So how do we do that? Consider that same kind of request in a GraphQL environment. You see, we are getting the author with a specific ID, and what do we want from this? We want just the name of the author, not any other information, just the name. If we want the email, we can also specify the email in our query, and also we want the articles of that author, and in the articles, which is also a separate object on its own, we just want the title and probably the date published. And each article has their comment object, so we want to get the comment object of each article, and we'll also specify that in the query. So you see, we are actually sending all the requests with just one query. We are getting all the specific data that we actually want for our profile page, unlike in a REST environment where we have to send several requests to fulfill this purpose. So in this case, we are eliminating underfetching because we can actually get the results by the author's name and a list of the articles, and each article is a list of their comments, a result like this. Alright, so you see that GraphQL minimize the amount of data that needs to be transferred over our network, and this helps us improve application efficiency and load balancing. So these are some of the benefits of GraphQL. GraphQL type systems are used to describe what data can be queried for and what data to expect from the server. Alright, so what are GraphQL schema? Schema are kind of a contract between the client and the server. It has like a blueprint that describes how the data can be accessed by the client. That's what the schema is. Alright, I will leave a link in the description of this video where you can read more about GraphQL from the official documentation. It's very easy to follow. One of the most common type of GraphQL API is the object type. We'll be seeing more of this. The object type is nothing far from the normal object, which contains a list of fields. So in this example, this is the object type that we are defining, and these are the fields, which is also a type. Also, we'll talk about this in a moment. And this is also a field, which is also a type also. So but this is an object type, and we'll be creating more and more object type because almost everything we'll be doing with object types. Alright, and GraphQL has two special types, which are like the root type, which is the query type, and the mutation type. And we'll look all this will make sense while we start coding, while we start seeing a practical application and implementation of what we are discussing here. Okay, so this field type refers to the scalar type. Scalar type are like our normal data type in our general programming language, where we have int, string, and all that. So GraphQL has its own scalar type, which are the types for simple fields Like we have the string type, we have the int type, we have the float type. I believe we can actually get that from our documentation. If we head to our documentation, the official documentation, you can see where we have the type language, the object type and feed, and you see where we have the scalar type. And the example of scalar type, you can see we have the int, we have float, we have string, and we have boolean. And also types are used to form the feeds of any object type, like this object type that you see here. For example, this is an example of an object type. You can see this is an object that is being defined called starship, which with an ID and a name, which is a string feed, and which also has its own type, which is the scalar type of string. And we have a length, which is a scalar type of float. Alright, so these are all about GraphQL. These are general overview about GraphQL. We cannot go into details and start explaining. Also, I would suggest you go through this official documentation. Okay, so enough for all the theory part. I suggest you go through this documentation and read it carefully so that you understand the different syntax and all that about GraphQL types and schema. But apart from that, we'll be practicing with our project. Okay, now understand that GraphQL is not just for Python. It can be used with every other framework, whether you're using Node.js, or in this case we'll be using it with Django. And the framework that we'll be using, or the package that we'll be using in Django to actually get this working, is the Django Graphene. Let's search for that. We can Google that and say Django Graphene. So we have the Django Graphene. The Django Graphene is just a lightweight GraphQL package, Django package that will help us build our API with ease. You can also read more about this. Let's go through it. Django Graphene is built on top Graphene. Graphene is like the general Python and GraphQL, you can call it packages or you can call it framework, whatever you choose. Is a general framework for Python programming. This you can use it with Flask, or you can also use it with Django, but the one that is specifically for Django is the Django Graphene. So it's built on top of the Graphene package. Django Graphene provides some additional abstractions that make it easy to add GraphQL functionalities to your Django project. Alright, so you can also read through this, but apart from that, we'll also be practicing a lot of this in our code. We'll be looking at how everything in this Django Graphene is what we'll be doing in our code, how to write our schema and how to write our resolvers and all that. Okay, right, back to the project I'll be practicing with. Let me show you a quick demo of the project. It's not too fancy. It's a Stack Overflow clone. We'll be building a developer forum. Don't mind the UI. This is not about CSS or JavaScript in design course. Alright, so this is just a simple bootstrap layout. Is a Django is a developer forum, just like Stack Overflow. And you can see there's nothing really here, so we have to log in. So we'll be looking at authentication in GraphQL, which is also very important. Then we can log in. Let me log in with password. Put in the password. Alright, now we are logged in. You can see top questions, and these are the top questions that are also in our app. We can decide to add questions. Once we come to add questions, you can add your questions, ask your questions. What's your question? Explain your question in details. You can see available questions. You can go through a question. You can see the question that is asked. You can see answers provided by other users, and you too can also provide your own answer. Let's provide a simple answer. It says, the question says, is Django the best framework? Let's say, of course yes. And you can see where our answer is immediately updated. You can see the answers. We have provided our answer, of course yes, so it's working. So this is what we're building. You can add your own question. Just say, Alright, tell us about your Django experience so we can submit our question. When we scroll down, you can see our "Do you love Django" is actually added to the bottom, and if you open, you can see it. Because this question was created by me, we can actually edit the question, or we can decide to delete the question. But if the question is not created by me, like let's look at this what's Django, which is created by another user. If we go into it, we won't see the delete and the edit button, because this question is not created by me, so we can't delete it. But if it's a question that is created by me, like this very question, I can decide to edit my question, or I can decide to delete my question. Alright, so it's a simple version of Stack Overflow. And we can also decide to search for question. If we search for Django, anything that has to do with Django, you can see what is Django. Is Django only synchronous? Do you love Django? Alright, these are search results. So these are what we can do. So we can add, we can delete, we can edit, we can provide answers to questions, we can search, we can log in, and we can log out, and we can also create new users. So these are what we'll be building. Is a full-fledged application. Don't mind the UI, don't say it's a very simple application. We'll be learning a lot in this application. Alright, enough for the intro, or enough for the talking. In our next video, we'll be starting fully building our API, or looking at building our first API with GraphQL or Django Graphene and Django. See you guys in next